Fiction and reality. New stories, new ideas. Little Beth Entertainment.
Welcome to episode 116 of The Rocketry Show at TheRocketryShow.com. Steve Thatcher of SMT Designs joins me. We'll talk about what's new and exciting at SMT Designs, as well as rocketry talk in general. Stick around. The Rocketry Show starts right after this. The Rocketry Show thanks Rocketry Forum for their support. This is CG, and I've been a member since 2010. The Rocketry Forum is a global community of rocketeers who openly discuss all aspects of hobby rocketry. If you have a question, hop on and ask. There are hundreds of experts who can answer just about any rocketry question you have. Check them out today at rocketryforum.com.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running.
Welcome to The Rocketry Show.
All right, lift off and the clock is started. Yes, sir. Reading loud and clear.
A podcast that is all about advanced and high-power rocketry. Amateur-built rockets, starting at mid-power to higher-power versions that can reach the edges of space. This program is hosted by the team who love the smell of burning ammonium perchlorate in the morning. Here are CG, Gene, and model rocket guy, Jesse Yu.
Welcome to another edition of The Rocketry Show at TheRocketryShow.com. I'm CG.
And I'm Gene.
And Jesse is off. He's flying rockets while we're recording this right now.
Lucky guy.
Yeah, we've got all kinds of short staffing going on here. So none of you guys want to work or something? Pandemic coming up on the Rocketry Show now?
We're all vaxxed, right?
Yeah. So anyway, we talked to Steve Thatcher, or at least I did, because while the interview was going on, you were out of town, and Jesse was dealing with personal stuff. So it's just me and Steve. So we're going to waste no time here and jump right into this with Steve Thatcher and of SMT Designs. And it went something like this. I would like to welcome back to the show Steve Thatcher of SMT Designs. And you may remember Steve from an episode, a couple of years ago at this point, I think, at least, maybe a little longer.
At three,
yes.
Something like that.
That feels about right.
Yeah.
So a lot's happened since then, so we'll be getting into that. And so I'd like to formally welcome to the show, Steve Thatcher. Welcome, Steve.
Glad to be here. Thank you, CG.
It's great having you on. So, so for those who don't know you or know something about you, tell us a little bit about yourself. Like, how long you've been in rocketry and some of your background professionally.
Oh, sure. Well, actually, I'll go through the background first. I'm a career engineer, electronics engineer, software development, hardware design, all aspects of design, basically embedded systems, control systems, applications, just pretty much a little bit of everything for the last 40 years.
Wow. Time flies.
And before that, I was doing stuff at home since grade school. So I just always been involved in technology, I guess, and grew up with the microprocessors when they started coming out in the 70s. So very early start in that. Now, leaping forward to rocketry, the quick note is, well, why didn't you do model rockets? Because that might be a question. I couldn't because Washington State required a pyrotechnics license and an adult that had the license to to buy the motors. I could go to the store and buy kits. I just couldn't. I could never buy a motor, so I never did anything with that. So I always had an interest in it, but never did anything with it, well, except making a few different things on my own, but I won't go into that because they were probably not exactly, we won't talk about those. Anyway, enter working for a company in the early 90s. Another electronics engineer was hired on, and he and I kind of struck up a friendship, and he said, have you ever heard of high power rocketry? So I said, what? and then the rest is history. This was like 1990. I ended up buying an Aerotech initiator kit with the Mantis pad, and I was flying G motors at places that you can't fly anything now, but back then you could. So my first introduction to real rocketry was high power rocketry, or at least mid power, right? I guess Aerotech, the copperhead igniters that some people they've screamed at, everything they've done to it. And because they were so easy to short, and of course, we always think of that as no joy. You press the button and nothing happens. I literally came away from launching a rocket where I was using a copperhead and nothing happened. And that weekend, I literally created a product called Verifier. It was a company called Impulse Aerospace. The gentleman I mentioned and I partnered in doing that company, and I created the Verifier electronic ignition system, used telco cable to run out to a battery box out at a pad. It could measure the continuity of the igniter. It could tell you whether it was shorted, or it could tell you whether it's open. So it was a parametric check of the igniter. We don't need those nowadays, but back then, the only way to guarantee a copperhead working was to know it wasn't shorted. That's why I always looked at it. I mean, they were never open typically, but shorted was like 9 times out of 10. So I designed the product, like I said, literally over a weekend. We went and made like 100 of them and started selling them. And part of that selling was to go to LDRS. So I have my certification card around here from LDRS 10, where I got my level 1. Well, actually, I don't even think they had levels back then. It was just, high power rocket. I flew an H motor in a Lock Vulcanite, actually. And that was the start of it, really. We went to LDRS 10 and 11, sold products down there, flew more rockets, and I started looking at electronics more, and started creating av bays back then with initial companies like Gee Whiz, and I can't remember there was an Alta something, I can't remember what it is, and Tommy over at Apogee, I'm sorry, not Apogee, but Adept was there back then. And so I was making bays using printed circuit boards or wooden bulkheads, and making brackets and putting them on them, and making a sled, that would carry a battery and a device. So I started doing that back in the 90s, early 90s. And as the years progressed, I went to printed circuit boards for the bulkheads and had round printed circuit boards made, always doing something toward that direction. Okay. And flew everything from, didn't do the M motors. I did L's and down. M motors bloody expensive, so it's not something I ever had the money for.
Yeah.
Or not lots of money like some people get to do.
Yeah.
It'd be fun, but anyway.
Right.
But anyway, if we leap ahead, and I'm working at this time with different companies, so getting more experience. I was doing product management. I was handling documentation. I was interfacing with groups to do a complete product release. So a lot of my experience for what has gone into SMT Designs has been based on all the facets of my career over the last 40 years, basically. Wow. So,
Perfect.
in fact, the first company I worked for was 1976.
Oh,
so,
okay.
Yeah,
Man.
I was born in the last millennium, I've come to say. It makes it sound so much more dynamic, right?
Yeah, and you went into work right at the time, at the beginning of the whole, very beginnings of the whole computer explosion.
Yeah, yeah,
So you've been there.
absolutely. Which I find humorous now because some of the stuff that I did as in designs, oh, that's a Charlie link or the filters they put on the Kalman filters. It's just an algorithm. It had no name back then. We just
Right.
did what we had to do.
Yes.
And I'm finding all this thing is like, I was doing that before Charlie even did that, but
Yeah.
it's kind of silly in some respects, but of course I approach it from the old man standpoint rather than the, wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
Anyway, but I guess leading into never could quite take the time and energy outside of working to really start a company full blast. And I finally retired 5 years ago now. 5? Goodness gracious, it has been 5. And started SMT Designs. And about that time, I was looking at 3D. Actually, I have a machine shop, milling machine and a metal lathe. So I was going to make parts, but the energy, the time that it takes to make things makes things so terribly expensive. And thank God 3D printing came into vogue. And that gave me a way to basically let the printer make the part. So I don't have to stand there and turn the cranks.
Right.
And it has let me do so many things so quickly that it's just, I can design, tell me something you need and I'll have a design for you the next day. It's been that easy.
Amazing how times have changed.
Oh yeah, it has. It has. I still have metal brackets I make for the eye bolt ends on my bays. I still do those on a milling machine. For example.
Right.
And no CNC, can't afford it.
They are fun though. I don't own any of it as well, but when Lock Precision was based here in the area, I always enjoyed just watching, and Barry owned it. Enjoyed watching Barry just cut out the fins on the CNC machines. Just give me your pattern and just how many you need. I just watch him going, man, I wish I could do that in my shop.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yes.
It's quite a technology leap in terms of manufacturing capability, whether you're doing subtractive manufacturing, such as cutting out fins, or additive manufacturing that the 3D printers do.
Right.
So each has their strengths and weaknesses. And if you know those, you can do some pretty cool stuff. Absolutely. Just a quick side note, I redoing a deck, for example. I'm going to be putting deck lights on them. And so I made landscape light holders that would go on the posts. And now I'm making conduit boxes small enough to go on the side of the joists. And so the animals can't get to the wires, et cetera. And it's like, because you can't buy any of that stuff. Well, you can buy the landscape lights for like $60 a crack, but it's like, no, I can design one and make as many as I need and just use a standard bulb and wire into it, which is exactly what I've been doing. So it gives me a very heavy creative outlet, I suppose, which I enjoy anyway. So yeah, anyway. But that's basically where it takes us up to SMT Designs and all the rocketry stuff that I did in the previous years. I was, again, I mentioned the idea of knowing what your manufacturing can do. Additive manufacturing, like printing, takes time. And so that's why if you look at my designs, everything's modular. There's no such thing as spending. I'm going to say this, and I'll retract that a bit. But I don't make a bay that's 8 inches long and it's all there, dedicated batteries and everything else. because it would not only take you days to print it, it's like it's specific. I mean, you can't sell that. At least I don't think you can. I don't even care for the modular ones that, oh, well, we support 4 different devices or 5 different devices. I support all of them. I support all the batteries because it's modular. Interesting note, I have a friend that just got his printer, and he was printing something, and he said, well, this thing takes 20 hours to print this. This is horrendous. And it's like, now you know why I do it all modular, right? I mean, I can do a bay. The end caps take more time because they're larger, right? The tray is generic, and the carriers and platforms I create all take anywhere from a half hour to hour and a half each, and that's it. So I can completely change out a bay's characteristic by just putting a different LiPo battery carrier on it and a new platform for a new device, and I'm done. Everything else, so that's how I can get to such a customized nature, and people can go to the website and, go down the list and what they want. And I just take out the designs and print them, each, and however many parts are involved, right? But 90% of the parts are all generic. Oh. They're all in all bays, and then there's 10% I have to actually change to a different part, but no modification, anything else.
Well, this is all going to be things that'll be interesting to get into as we talk on the products a little bit more, to kind of get a picture for folks as to how that's possible to do. But before we take our break, though, you did touch on something earlier when you were talking about the early days of Rocketry when you first got into LDRS, and I have a question. And
yes,
and you mentioned that there were no levels back then; it was just high power Rocketry, and you just put a big motor. So, what was it like transitioning to the point where there were levels? How did they handle that?
Well, I think they call it a consumer certification back then. Okay, which was basically you just did, a high power flight, and for mine was an H-128.
Okay,
that was it.
Okay,
the next thing I could do was a K. Didn't make a difference. I was now qualified.
Okay.
Well, not really, but you know what I mean. Which is why they came up with levels saying, well, we had this guy do an H-128 flight, and the next thing he did is flying a K-550. And it's like, and it fell apart. Why did it fall apart? Because he didn't know what he was doing. So I think, and I don't know when they actually introduced the levels. Somewhere about mid-90, my life took a little bit of a different direction, and I'm sure yours probably has at times too. And I was out of Rocketry. I didn't get rid of anything, but I didn't pay my dues, so I lost my certification, my single certification. And then my life changed back to the better direction toward later in the 90s. And I don't know if you've ever heard of a launch called Fire in the Sky.
No, I haven't heard of that one.
It's one that started out here in 2000. In Washington State. And unfortunately, as we all know, we've been losing venues right and left. And the club that was hosting Fire in the Sky in a place called Mansfield, Washington, because I always get confused with Winchester and Manchester, whether it's a soccer club or a rifle. It's like, no, it's I have to think about it, But anyway, they lost their field like 3 years ago, and that was the last FITS they had. But they had been launching. FITS started in 2000, actually, and I was at the first FITS and probably the second or third one. And that was actually in Washington State. And that started there. And that's kind of when I got back into it. My youngest daughter was 8 years old, and she came with me. And my older daughter is like 11 at that time and wasn't really into rocketry. But we did some rocketry a few years earlier than that, and and so forth. So that was my restarting into it. And when I restarted, I joined Tripoli again, and we've got levels. Oh, okay. So I put together a PML Quasar and did my level 1. I got a PML Endeavor and did my level 2. And then I had plans to do level 3, and then life turned around and did its thing on me. And I never got around to do that until 2019, actually. So, but I was flying rockets all the time elsewhere, but I mentioned that $400 expensive motor, and and it's just like, well, and I never got back to it because it wasn't that important. And I finally said, I need to take care of this. If not just to let people know that yes, I can even do a L3 and it's still okay.
Right.
And in fact, Frankenstein was a project I started in 2000. And that's why he's called Frankenstein, because it's a patchwork rocket that I flew in 2019.
Okay.
It had parts from Mad Cow. It had parts of the original rocket that I built. It had my bay in it. I mean, it really, I put hazmat stickers on it and Band-Aids and have some fun. Right?
That's funny.
Anyway.
Well,
it's good, definitely.
Very good. So really cool information to find out there. And I definitely have, we'll have to do a historical show with one of our folks who lived through that transition. Because I'm curious, what I was curious about are how do they handle someone who's been in the whole time and they're flying high power rockets, and then they introduce the levels. Did they grandfather people in? How did they? I have to find out on that one. That's fascinating.
Yeah, I believe they did, but I wasn't.
Right.
I kept my number, my 1424 Tripoli number.
Oh, that's good. That's cool.
But, it's like, well, you got to certify. You got to what? Oh, yeah. Okay.
Okay, no problem.
But, no problem. Exactly.
Well, anyway, we're going to take a break here. We're talking to Steve Thatcher of SMT Designs. We're going to be getting into what's been going on with SMT Designs since our last program. And we're going to take a quick break, take care of some sponsors, and we'll be right back after this. You are listening to The Rocketry Show at TheRocketryShow.com. It's time for eRockets.biz. eRockets.biz is your home for unique model rocket kits, as well as the world's largest selection of rocket parts from Simrock. They've been in business since 2009. eRockets.biz has a wide selection of your favorite kits, as well as their own versions of popular out-of-production models many of you have come to enjoy over the years. Jim is back right now, and he's been looking through the site, and he found something cool to talk about. What'd you find?
Oh, I find all kinds of cool stuff at eRockets, man. It's a great website. Well,
Yes.
It's a lot of times we're always talking rockets, of course, and there's some things, sometimes the accessories get a little lost. And this is one thing that I found that Matt Steele came up with that I absolutely love, because I use it for many things. And it is the North Coast Rocketry X stand. It's basically a stand for your rocket so you can work on it horizontal. My TARC kids have 4 of them that they use. And if you ever go out to a launch site and you prop up your rocket against the car, or you let it lay in the grass, but you have a table, but you can't lay it on the table because you're working on something. This thing is small, lightweight, and beautiful. It's like a PVC pipe that's got 2 stands on either end of it. It's machined, CNC'd perfectly, fits together in about 2 seconds. You can glue it if you want to. You don't have to take it apart to make it transport. Very small, very lightweight. And it holds your rocket very, very well on the table or even on the trunk. Because there are times that I actually put a 4-inch rocket on it and on my trunk because I didn't have a table. But it's nice for either display or actually if you're working in the field for it. So if you go to the eRockets website and look under the North Coast Rocketry accessories, it's called the North Coast Rocketry Accessory X stand. And I think they're amazing. It's just something's really simple, something really, you don't really think about it, but once you get one, it's kind of like that spray nozzle for the spray cans that I use. Once you get it, you're always going to use it. And it's got 3D printed bushings, PVC piping, plywood X stands themselves. It's got an adjustable cradle that you can position it anywhere from 2 to 17 inches just with a touch of the finger. And it handles most rockets. They say between 5-inch and 2.64, but I've also put 4-inch rockets on it easily without any trouble. And it's the North Coast Rocketry X stand for a great value for $15.99. You know, Matt Steele and Dave Myers worked on this, and it's just they hit it out of the ballpark with something so simple and so small, but it does so much. And so I recommend go to the eRockets website and check out the North Coast Rocketry Accessory X stand. It's part NCR 821.
All right, it's so cool. And if you need parts for your own custom builds, that is no problem because eRockets.biz also supplies the Semrock line of airframes, nose cones, centering rings, motor mounts, and so much more, including NCR rocket stand we just talked about.
yeah, the X stand.
Yes, eRockets has more rocket parts available than anyone else on Earth. And there's also plenty of other rocketry items to choose from, such as educational rocket kits and supplies, air rockets, water rockets, and so much more. You get the picture, right? eRockets.biz certainly has enough kits and supplies to keep you busy in your workshop for a long time to come. So check out eRockets.biz today to learn more. eRockets.biz. If rocketry scares you, buy a train set.
Going up in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, liftoff.
From Little Beth Media, a new podcast on model rocketry with build techniques, model rocket history, interviews with industry insiders, stuff for beginners and longtime model rocketeers, everything from low to mid-power. The Model Rocket Show with me, the Rocket Noob, at TheRocketryShow.com or anywhere you download podcasts.
North Coast Rocketry, one of the first high-power rocketry kit companies ever, takes advantage of over 30 years of high-power experience by a world-class rocketeer. You can look to North Coast Rocketry to expand your high-power rocket fleet. In addition to great kits, North Coast Rocketry also stocks lots of must-have items and accessories for every rocketeer's workshop. Find out more about these kits and other great products today. Go to northcoastrocketry.com. And while you're there, don't forget to get their latest catalog, northcoastrocketry.com. Advanced rockets that are easy to build, fun to fly, and look great on display. Welcome back to The Rocketry Show at TheRocketryShow.com. CG here, and I'm talking to Steve Thatcher of SMT Designs, and we are back. And speaking of SMT Designs, let's go on a little bit about that. When did you start it, and what was the very first SMT Design products that was official as SMT Designs?
You really want to know that? It's not rocketry related.
Oh, really? Well, that's even more interesting.
Well, SMT is my initials.
Right.
So it's like, and there are certain people saying, well, that's surface mounted technology. No, it's not. Anyway.
It is these days in some circles, but not here.
Well, in some circles, but I predate that. So, and I've worked with that too, so I don't care. Anyway, but I always wanted to start a company. And I had that bit with Impulse Aerospace with Verifier, and I could always do something, but it's like I always want to do something I had a passion about, because if you don't have a passion for it, you shouldn't be doing it. Right. There's so many unhappy workers out there, right? Yes. So it's like I don't want to do that. Never have wanted to. Mm-hmm. Actually, I'm trying to think. Some of the first things I actually did were photographic products. I was doing calendars. I had a good friend, a photographer who passed away from ovarian cancer, unfortunately, and that was 2015. And I took up, and that was me too. She was a great person, great photographer. And I worked with her a bit, and we, her wife and my wife and 4 of us would get together, have a great time, and we'd go out to like the ocean and take pictures and stuff like that. And so I was just kind of, I've always been a photographer through the years, but never never one that I consider professional. And working with her, that was actually the first thing I did. The website, in fact, you'll probably find references to photographic products and so forth in Facebook pages and so forth, because I can't figure out how to change it. But she used to make a desk calendar, like in a CD case style, a front page and a back page with the description of the 12 pages inside, which was the 13 months of the year, basically.
Okay.
So, and I figured out how to do that and replicate it and use Photoshop and stuff. And I actually have been making calendars every year. We just do kind of local, give them to friends now. But they're usually flower calendars for the 13 months of next year type of thing. And I've been doing that for the last 3 or 4 years. So, and I used to try to do more when I went to rocket launches. I'd take my camera and the lenses and I'd try to take time out to take scenic shots and things like that. And those have gone onto some of the calendars too. But I focused on the rocketry aspect so much more, and thinking about all that. And that's kind of where that all started. Once the 3D printing took hold, that was like, oh, go that way. And actually, in between, while I was doing the photos, I created a digital clock. If you can picture a ring with 60 LEDs on it.
Right.
And that's all. It's just strictly a ring.
Okay.
And but they are RGB, so they're multicolor. With the right computer software and the right hardware design, I can change the colors of the LED to mimic the quarter-hour marks and the second hands and minute hands.
Got it.
And I sold a few of those.
Okay.
Okay. But they didn't take hold in terms of a sellable product. I kicked around doing a Kickstarter thing, but then the pandemic hit, and it's like, forget that.
Yeah.
I mean, everything's been hosed since, and I wouldn't even go down that road now. But so that was all. I designed the printed circuit boards. I designed the circuitry that went on it. I wrote the software. I created 3D printed rings that the LEDs went into. So it was literally a complete product design, and it was all under my control. So that's nothing got sent out for manufacturing. In other words, I got raw parts in and built them. Yeah. And like I said, sold a few. So that was because that didn't really take off in terms of selling more of them. And like I said, the 3D printing was something I was just starting in. And then it's like, hey, I could make yes, perfect. A revelation, epiphany time. And that's what started it all. And, the idea of modularity, again, that's reuse and reusability and reusing designs. That all came from my career, because that's what we always tried to do from a product standpoint at a company. So it's all that background is where SMT Designs has come up with the Bay designs and so forth. Learning how the 3D printer would let me do the physical mounting and so forth, what I could do with the printers, what I couldn't do, and adoption of standards. What a novel concept.
Yes.
You're getting some of my engineering humor in here, too.
Yes. As we did last time.
Yeah, probably. But without standards, it's like, how can you progress, right? It's like if Gary at Aerotech had not standardized on absolute rocket motor sizes, where would we be, right? I mean, from his standpoint, silly things like, why in the hell would you do a 5/16" screw in the top of a 54 millimeter rocket case? It can be 1024. It could be it's some of the standards were not necessarily engineered standards, but here, that'll work, and I can hear that. I can hear those words ringing too, and part of what I can do with my product line is stay a little light-footed. I will introduce improvements in the designs, and I have. A couple years ago, about the same time, I changed the design of the carriers and platforms to make them standard, because I was realizing as I was doing these, it's like, well, the pattern's different if it's on the bottom or on the top. So I literally had to make mirror images of some of the carriers and platforms. And how stupid is that? So no, I've got to change it. I have to change this to a standard footprint. And that's the answer. And that's exactly what I did. Now you buy an AV bay from 54 and up, and I'll say it that way because I'll get to why I said it that way, but it is all the same footprint for the platforms and carriers. So all the devices I already support are done. Yeah, I have to do nothing else. The biggest thing that happened between the last time we chatted and I can't give you a date when, but I expanded out to 98 millimeter. Okay. And you've seen my product and the trays, and think of a double wide tray, still the same footprint, now doubled. So I can put 2 platforms on each side and batteries, et cetera, because again, all the parts are compatible. The 142 millimeter version that goes in the 5.5-inch rocket I sent you the picture on, that same footprint, nothing different. The only change there was in the 98 millimeter, I went to 1/4 20 threaded rods, and in 5.5 and above, it's all 5/16 naturally for more strength.
Got it.
But all the parts fit. So no re-engineering.
Mm-hmm.
I just have to make bigger and bigger end caps, right?
Right. So since you've got them all standardized, the bigger you go, the more room you've got to add a couple more sleds in there for whatever people might want to do too, huh?
Oh, but there's that magic word sled.
That's
I
right.
don't use that.
Trays.
Yeah. Well, you've got your tray that goes on the threaded rods, and then you have essentially mounting slots in the trays for the carriers and platforms. The carriers are the small devices and small batteries that fit that format, and the platform is kind of a double length carrier. And I had to create my own definitions, because when somebody, oh yeah, I made a sled for my rocket. Well, okay. Unfortunately, that puts me on High Street Hill in the winter going down a sled. And that's really what I think of first. And I understand why people call them that. It's somebody started doing it, and oh yeah, it's a sled. And it's like, well, I can't call it that because it makes no sense.
Yeah, because yours are attaching to a carrier tray. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and even the tray is not what you'd call a traditional sled. And you've heard, I think you remember me saying, well, the traditional bay design, they use a sled. And they drill holes in it, and they mount the parts on it and stuff like that. Everything's customized. The bulkheads, you drill the holes in, and you figure out how you're going to get the wires through, or get the connections through, or however you're doing it. You figure out how you're going to do a switch. All those decisions are left to you. And engineering, it's like, no, I'm not. I don't want to spend that much time in every rocket bay that I do, and that was also the impetus behind this whole thing. It's like, I can make it so anyone can fly, even if they really don't have any electronics experience, as long as they can grab enough skill to solder some wires, and they'll have a working bay, And how many rockets have you seen fail when people are just trying to do their own thing and they really don't have the experience to do it, but they're trying, and and how many people left the hobby because of things like that. So I wanted to make it easy, I wanted to make it reliable, and I wanted to make it repairable and upgradable, all in that same thing. And that's what I've accomplished with what I'm doing. So I'm pretty proud of it, actually, in that respect. I don't think anyone else in the industry has done as much focus on that whole aspect. I mean, they've done some good stuff, and I'm not downplaying anybody's products. I just think there was more that could be done. I think my business card says something about engineered solutions. And, with the background, it's exactly what I try to do. Everything in there has a reason behind it, which is not typical, because I take a systems view versus here, let's just do this. And, and it's like, no, well, anyway, type of thing. But
Understood. I definitely get that with,
Anyway.
even when I design a rocket, it's like the high power rockets in particular, none of them are just hollow tubes. There's, every piece of the rocket has something that it needs to do something in the mission. And, when it comes,
the guts are important.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So on the so with your kits, you design you mentioned that you make the design so that it's easy, it's simple, and people stand a high chance of success using your kits versus going out and trying to figure it all out on their own. So one of the things I wanted to ask about is dealing with all kinds of different customers and different folks. Do you have any tips? Like if somebody were to order a SMT design kit from you right now, and they're ready to start building, what tips would you give for somebody to prevent oops things from happening, or any oops things that people, or misunderstandings with the kits?
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to preface my answer with, I wish I had more time to do more documentation. So, okay. And I just have to be upfront about that. I mean, there are picture series of how the thing should go together. And there are some, I do have a complete assembly manual that I created for my BT-60 bay, for example. All of them are all in the same vein. I just don't have explicit instructions for all of them. Okay. The first tip is, if you have a question, don't assume anything. Ask. Call me. I had a new customer call me, and I talked to him today. He had a few questions. He was thinking about plastic rivets, and he didn't know how he would mount his bay and things. And some of that's not obvious, but if you go out to the site, you can see some of the bays that I've done. And they are not, how do I put this? They're not a dedicated bay to one type of rocket, okay? Obviously, you pick the device and battery. You pick whether you want dual deployment or redundant dual deployment. But beyond that, and you pick the size of the tubing and things, okay? But he didn't know how the bays actually mounted, and that's one of the things that I've done that I don't know anybody else that does what I do in this standard. Every bay I do has a mounting ring on both ends. Okay, and I mean a 1/2-inch wide disc or whatever with metal inserts around it, 120 degrees apart, on both ends. Okay. The switch end mounting ring is also a cap. So it supplies the step bulkhead and goes into your coupler, or it goes into a coupler tube. And those 3 mounting holes, you always have to be mounting your bay on one end of the airframe. At least I I don't have a floating. I don't do floating av bays. I don't know even how that would work, but I guess you could. Kind of a mortar type of thing, maybe. I don't know, but anyway, most configurations involve mounting the av bay in one piece of the airframe, either above or below, and it's solid. And the rest of that coupler tube av bay goes in the other airframe, and that's where your rocket connects together. Whether you do shear pins or whatever you want to do, but you've got one end of the MAV bay mounted, okay? Frankenstein, the rocket I mentioned earlier, is what I call a shotgun. Two airframes meet at the middle of the av bay, both mount to that av bay. Okay. So I'm blowing out the laundry both ends. Kind of my preference. But some rockets, the picture of Stubby I sent you is a single-ended rocket. It's single deploy too, but I'm still pushing the laundry out, I guess. The Black Brant, that bay is, actually, I'm trying to think. I think it was mounted only on one. I kept trying to remember the Mad Cow configuration of the Black Brant. So the booster section below, the drogue's down below, and the av bay goes down into the booster section airframe. So it's a single-ended av bay.
So
still
when it
redundant
separates,
deploy.
it stays attached to the front half of the rocket, and the booster section separates away.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and the nose cone upper airframe is supposed to pull the drogue out, and that gets deployed. Then everybody's hanging down, waiting for the altitude to reach for the main, right? So, but that's not typical of any of the other bays that I've seen. I don't know anybody else that does. They expect you to use the plastic rivets or to somehow, mount the coupler tube into the rockets and so forth. Well, mine's already built in. And part of that reason for the one-ended thing is the arming switch is built into that end cap also. So there's a screw that you literally screw into it, and you turn it down until it turns it on. There's a mechanical switch, a commercial switch in there that you are holding in place when it's armed, what I call positive retention. I might have said that last time. But the point is, there's no way that switch is going to break contact under G-force or anything, right? So, and that's one of the holes in that mounted section, so everything can happen the way it's supposed to. And when I do redundant bays, the addition is there's two switches, one either opposite each other for the 54 through 75, or at like 22.5 degrees or 45 degrees apart on the 98 and above bays. One of the pictures I sent you was an 8-inch bay, essentially. That was, remember when I was mentioning the time it took to print things? Those mounting rings took 32 hours each to print. Yeah, larger diameter, height's the killer, but larger diameters also take a lot of time. So it's much more economical for smaller bays.
Yes.
Oh, shoot. But anyway.
Yeah, I'm looking, taking a good look at this while you're talking. So when someone places an order with you, when their orders are basically like with the end caps, they're just become like a custom build of the end caps, and then you supply the trays and attachments.
Well, that's a good way to put it. I mean, it's technically I've built up enough of intellectual property designs, I guess, if you want to call it that, where I pull out the right sized end cap that I need for that customer's order, and I print it. So it's not like I have to design it each time. I just pull out the file for it and print it. So it actually, and I don't try to stock anything because that's wasted plastic and time. Technically, when I get an order, I start I make a list of the parts I need, and I just go out and start printing them. And it takes as long as it takes, and that's your custom bay. I don't have to design anything, actually, because it's already been designed, I guess. Now, interesting enough, though, I mean, obviously that 8-inch diameter mounting rings, those I did do a new design on just this last month because the customer needed that large of one. And the trays that went in his 8-inch rocket are the 5/16 went on 5/16 inch rods. Those are the same trays that went in the black brand. So again, I'm not doing new trays. I'm just using the same standard trays. And again, because all the carriers and platforms fit, I don't have to. It's not just a custom design. It's made it kind of cool, actually. And then there's people who get in touch with me. I sent you a picture of a T-slot tray, essentially. The customer wanted to mount. He wanted to do, his words were he wanted a professional bay, and he wanted it to mount on T-rails he put into it. So I got the dimensions on the T-rails. I designed a tray, same tray that I have, so I just duplicated that and customized it for the T-slots. So it actually rides perfectly into the hole slot of the hole there, and he can tighten it down and he can lock it any place along the T-rail he wants. And because the trays are generic, the rest of the parts there are 460 milliamp hour LiPo battery holders, and I think an RRC3 and 2 RRC2Ls. If I remember the parts complement on that one. And again, those were all the same parts I already produce. And so I'm able to come up with a custom product just by doing one thing. One way of looking at it.
Work
right?
smarter, not harder.
Yeah, I've used that term in decades before this too. Things I learned along the way. Yeah. Well, it's not easy for people to come up with things when their background hasn't been in a manufacturing direction, yes. I think. I mean, there's some great stuff out there. Really is. But not a lot of reusability and dedicated parts. And it's just like, that doesn't even, I couldn't even do that. It grate on my nerves. Anyway.
Yeah, I hear you. So shoot. We're going to take another quick break, and we're going to come back with Steve Thatcher of SMT Designs. We have a few more things to go through, of course. And this has been a great show. Hope you're enjoying it as much as we are doing it. And we'll be right back right after this.
Absolutely.
It's time for Serious Rocketry. Serious Rocketry since 1998, providing the Rocketeer with great kits, motors, supplies, and more. They have lots of products in their ever-growing web store with fast shipping, wide selection, and courteous service. You can also check out the amazing and popular Serious Rocketry kits that harken back to the days of fun-to-build detailed kits that are more than just 3 fins and a nose comb. And, Gene, what did you find?
Well, depending on my mood, sometimes I like to go really big, not necessarily fast, but just big. And sometimes I like, or go home, right? Sometimes, I'd rather fly rockets. But there are times that I want to go, I just want to slam the biggest motor in a crazy rocket, a small rocket, and see how high it can go, provided I got my GPS and all that good stuff to get it back. So I've always loved this rocket, and it's made by Aerotech. Now, you think that they're good at making motors. We all know and love them. But they also have a great selection of some pretty awesome kits. And I'm looking at the Aerotech Arrow. It's spelled ARREAUX, but it's pronounced Arrow. It's a small hot rod of a rocket. Yeah, it's all fancy, Frenchy kind of thing, I guess. I don't know. I guess that's fancy. But it's got a payload section that makes it perfect for lofting altimeters, GPS, accelerometers, other experimental projects. And it is 43 inches long with a 1.9-inch diameter tube. It weighs just about 12 ounces. So this thing is light. And it is a screamer. If you put a G in this, it'll easily exceed 3,000 feet. And I know of some people who have actually done a little beef up on the Arrow, and they've actually got them to go supersonic. So it is a great rocket. It's solid. The fin set is Aerotech's got that fin lock design stuff. It's really well done. You could do baffle-less ejection if you wanted to, but you don't have to. Well, it's got a baffle if you wanted to use it, but if you don't want it, that's fine too. And it's going for $67.99 at Sirius Rocketry. It comes with everything you need to scream into the sky. So I suggest you go and pick yourself up an Aerotech Arrow from Sirius Rocketry.
All right, and when you build that kit and get it all ready and you're ready to fly, Sirius Rocketry has motors and hardware in stock from Estes through Aerotech High Power, as well as popular electronics from Jolly Logic and more. And while you're ordering all those parts, including this kit, just keep in mind that Sirius Rocketry's website features real-time stock tracking, which lets you order with confidence from their online store, no having to call or write to see if something is really in stock. And be sure to ask them about their club specials as well. Visit their websites today at SIRIUSrocketry.biz and .com. Sirius Rocketry, for the serious Rocketeer.
Hey, all you rocket geeks out there. Do you like doing in-flight videos of your flights? And do you ever use those keychain cams and unfortunately sometimes only get videos of your thumb? Hey, this is Gene from The Rocketry Show, and that used to happen to me. I used to use those old keychain cams only to get nothing very good quality. But I found a solution to that, and it's Insane Rockets. It's an app that's available on the Google Play Store for Nexus 5X and higher. Now get this, it does 4K video. But not only that, it'll upload it automatically to the cloud and provide you real-time telemetry while tracking your rocket through Google Earth. It is amazing. Available on the Google Play Store, Insane Rockets app. It's crazy. No, wait. It's insane.
Lock Precision Rocketry manufactures a full line of high-quality precision fit components to meet your building, repairing, and customizing needs. Lock Precision believes in making rocket kits as light as possible while maintaining the strength required to fly with commercially available motors. Lock Precision offers a wide range of rocket kits from the 1-inch diameter Lock 1 series to high-power rockets reaching 7.6 inches in diameter. When you visit lockprecision.com, be sure to check out their Performance Series kits featuring such designs as the Black Brand 10, the Caliper ISP, and the 3.1-inch diameter Iris rocket. All of Lock Precision's performance kits comes with everything you need, including pre-slotted airframes, high-grade precision-cut plywood fins and components, as well as ripstop nylon parachutes, rugged shock cords, polypropylene nose cone, and instructions. The name Lock Precision has been synonymous with mid and high-power rocketry for over 30 years. Check out lockprecision.com to find out why. Lockprecision.com. Fly higher. Fly Lock. Welcome back to The Rocketry Show at TheRocketryShow.com. Steve Thatcher is with us, and we are talking about all the cool stuff going on at SMT Designs. And we went through the bays and some tips and tricks on that, as well as some further insight from Steve. So thanks very much for that. So the next part of this is to go through another question I have here, and that is more from the point of view, it's more of a generic question, okay? Let's say I'm designing a rocket that I want to build, and I'm hearing this show, and I'm thinking, ooh, yes, I want to use one of these SMT design bays in my rocket. So I think you've touched on a little bit about what's different about your product from other AV bay designs. So what other things should somebody have in mind as far as making a rocket design where they want to intentionally incorporate an SMT Designs AV bay into that rocket?
Well, it's an interesting question. There's trying to think of the best way to answer that. As far as I'm concerned, okay, this is my bias. You can put an SMT Design bay in any rocket.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I support the different coupler sizes. I can support multiple different variable lengths for bays. Nothing's dedicated in terms of where, that won't fit that, It's true that if you buy an SMT Designs bay, you buy it for a particular airframe size or coupler tube size. a wall thickness of the coupler tube because my products have to fit inside that coupler tube.
Right.
An interesting note, and some people might not realize this, technically, the only standard for a coupler tube is outside diameter.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay? And technically, the only standard dimension for a airframe is the inside diameter.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. With keeping, and we still have manufacturers that one manufacturer's tubing won't fit somebody else's.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Just because they just needed to make sure their product fit their stuff.
Right.
Okay. So anyway, so it is a wild woolly environment out there in that respect. Okay?
Yes.
I have 2- and 3-inch sections of a lot of the manufacturers' coupler tubes and airframe tubes, and all their sizes from 29 on up, and PML, Blue Tube, Lock, Mach 1, Mad Cow, Proline, that does the Rocketry warehouse stuff, and the new Rocketry, I can't remember the name, sorry. Composite warehouse. There we go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean it's all a moving target, so to speak, and
Mm-hmm.
things are changing hands, but those sizes have been basically cast in manufacturers' standards. Well, even Wildman, but he had to change vendors some time back. So even his changed a little bit between years type of thing. So, but I deal with all those sizes.
Okay.
So when you buy a bay, you do have to buy it for a size of rocket. Now, if that say it's a 54, okay, what I call normal wall, 16th inch. So it's a blue tube rocket. Well, that would also fit PMLs. Quantum tubing. It would also fit their phenolic tubing, So you could go to those 3 manufacturers and buy rockets from them. And as long as it had a coupler tube in it, you could put my bay in it.
Okay.
Okay. I do sell the end caps separately if somebody wants to buy them. They could rebuild their bay to go for a different diameter rocket. They could make it larger. I mean, anywhere from the 54 to 75, technically, you could just replace the end caps and put it in a larger or smaller rocket, depending on what was in the first place. And whatever tubing diameter it is from a wall standpoint, right? Different manufacturers. So you're able to customize it later if you want, or you can just buy another bay and you could choose to not get any platforms and take them off the other bay that you already have and swap those type of things. But some of that stuff gets so cheap, it's not worth the trouble.
Right.
Because every time you take something apart, you run the risk of wearing something out,
Mm-hmm.
I guess.
Yes.
And one of the critical parts on some of the altimeters and different things are these green blocks, the connector blocks.
Mm-hmm.
They're only designed for so many uses.
Yes.
They're not made to be done day in and day
Mm-hmm.
out, and they do have a finite lifetime.
Right.
So doing a bay and having dedicated wiring from those devices going out that you just have to change connections on the other side, that takes all the stress off the parts you've got. And you can do the reuse thing if you want. I tend to think with the prices of the devices being so low cost, egg timer stuff, for example. I mean, you can do a cork or an apogee for under $20 and put it together yourself, and you've got a dual deployment or a single deployment bay, essentially, the device for it. It's cheap enough where you under $100 you have the entire bay, battery, and altimeter. When I started, God, I think the Gee Whiz was like $125, and then you had to use 9-volt batteries.
Yeah.
Oh
man.
Now we have non-standard lipos, and they come in all shapes and sizes.
Yes.
So but the key thing in all that, the tip I would give the person that would be interested in the Bay is any questions, send me an email, call me. I will try to answer your questions as quick as I can get around to it. Sometimes I'm a little dense and I don't get back as quickly as I wish I could, but I will draw on my experience and try to help out in any way I can. I have this philosophy that I have to say, it's all good. There are so many ways to do something that I won't tell you, oh, it's got to be done that way. I mean, there's very few things in my life when it comes to rocketry that, are in the category of, oh, that is, it has to do that way. I don't believe in that per se. Although I was talking to somebody earlier. No, anyway. No, there are very few items. I mean, you will talk to some people, oh, you've got to use that glue. And, oh, you have to use that battery. Oh, the batteries, 9-volt batteries have to be horizontal because they'll come apart if they don't. And it's like, it's because they had an experience one time where that failed. And without knowing exactly what failed, they assumed they knew. And they said that, and there's nothing wrong with that, but unless you analyze your failures and truly understand what happened, how can you make a all-encompassing decision?
Right.
I could be a politician, goodness. Anyway.
Well, not the kind that they want, because they don't want politicians that will analyze anything and get down to the truth.
I know, that's exactly the problem we have.
Yes.
Anyway,
oh, man.
Sorry to
we
mention
digress.
politics at all. Yeah, I know. Stop. Okay, go ahead.
That's okay. Yeah, you were mentioning the connectors on the little green connectors with the screw terminals on them.
Yeah.
And the use of those terminals was kind of like the driving force behind when I started doing dual deploy, to essentially dedicate the electronics to a rocket. And each rocket had its own electronics. And then the only time I ever reused it is if I retired that rocket and I would move, to another rocket, and it will live in that rocket for the operational lifetime of that rocket.
Sure.
And then after that, the device probably just needs to be replaced anyway.
Yeah, well, and they do. I mean, it's in the old days, gee whiz, they were actually acceleration based only. They had no air pressure sensor. So they're not prone to contamination, but the air pressure sensors are. They have that little micro hole in them, and they have to be measuring them. And if your ejection gases go in your av bay, you can't clean it.
Right.
There's nothing you can do.
Yes.
It's easier to replace the device
right.
Than to take the chance. I had which rocket was it? I think it might have been an early Adept, like an Alt 25 or something. I can't remember the actual product, but it worked and worked and worked. In fact, the rocket's name was Boo, bat out of ... because it was a 38 millimeter rocket, about 5 feet long. And I had broken it. I'd fixed it. It went through a lot of iterations, but it flew and flew and flew until finally the last time I flew it, it didn't eject. It was perfect continuity and everything. So here's this rocket. It comes down. It's blue tube, and it's been broken enough where it's now bulletproof almost.
Yes.
It hits the ground. It didn't come in ballistic, at least. It hit the ground, and I'm looking at it. It didn't separate, and all of a sudden, poof.
Oh, geez.
It finally reached ground.
Right.
And I'm going, oh, God. Okay, I'm not using that altimeter anymore.
Right.
It just evidently enough contamination and stuff. The sensor finally gave up, and it was such an old product. It probably didn't have any of the redundant sensor checks that we do nowadays to make sure that the sensor is valid and all this. It was the old days. So it's just like a lot of that stuff just didn't have those type of capabilities. Boo hasn't flown again. But interestingly enough, it's blue tube. It takes a 38 millimeter Bluetooth bay, and I've got one sitting down on the floor here that's a 38 millimeter Easy Mini that I could fly into Boo. So, I mean,
Right.
the rocket could still fly again, but the bay, would be replaced. So, yeah. In fact, that's probably more what I do. I usually take old rockets and convert them to electronic because it's so much better than I run simulations in everything I do, but simulations are a simulation. And in fact, I just haven't really released this yet, but you're familiar with Pemberton Space, right? Their Space Arc. I did it's kind of a neat jet planey type look thing, and that was also the headliner in the Silver Fleet Challenge I did at LDS 39 this last summer. Okay. But of course, he's called Valley Forge, which of course is a waving hands to silent running, because that was the name of the ship. Okay.
That's where my brain went when you said that. I just wasn't sure.
I do everything with a reason. Everything's got a reason,
Yes.
But what I created was a single deploy bay. It consumes exactly 2 inches. Okay. So it's stacked. It's literally my standard switch block mounting ring with a special part that goes over it that holds a device like an apogee or a cork or a Stratologger or an Easy Mini with a very small, like 110 or 160 milliamp hour LiPo battery at top. And I can get that into 2 inches. And that has become my stacked bay. It's a motor deployment replacement bay, because I can trust that, because that's how confident I feel about the electronics and what the bay is going to do.
Right.
That picture of Stubby, he's got one of the stacked bays in there. The photo, of course, that was the liftoff. But first time I ever flown the stacked bay, first time I ever flown Stubby, he went to 4,000 feet. The parachute came out and I got him back. So, it's just, I did simulate him. I knew how high he was supposed to go, but I didn't have to drill a motor, a delay grain. I didn't have to guess. I didn't have to have any anomalies in flight that caused it to be either too late or too soon, because I can rely on the electronics. And that's the tip I give people. You can rely on the electronics if you feel confident enough in what you've done. And that's kind of what I feel with my bays. As long as somebody has relatively okay skills at learning how to solder, all the parts are there, all the wires are there, and the instructions are there to a degree, like I mentioned. And I'm always I'm always answering questions to help people out. And once you've done one, the next one, so it's part of it is not necessarily, oh yeah, I know where all this goes. I try to segregate parts so they're related to what they're bagged with. So like all my platforms come with the mounting screws and everything in it. It's not just a big bag of hardware that you have to figure out. So it's that type of thing. I mean, I try to get things in related views, and as long as you do that and use those parts for that and refer to the pictures and ask a question if you need to, you can make a bulletproof bay. The first electronic bay, and have it work perfectly.
And be bulletproof.
Yeah. I really do. I mean, it's as long as you charge the battery, it's not totally bulletproof. As long as you put black powder in the charge canisters,
Well, as far as the bay goes itself and protecting things, it would be bulletproof.
That's the way I feel. Yeah, exactly.
Well, Steve, thanks a lot for hanging out with us and talking about things at SMT Design. This was a lot of fun.
You've had no problem getting me to talk, have you?
Not at all, but it's been great.
It has very much, CG. Thank you.
Thank you. Alrighty, there you go. That was my fun interview with Steve Thatcher and of SMT Designs, all kinds of cool things. And I can't wait to get a hold of one of those kits for a future rocket build. Maybe my level 2 rocket will use the SMT Design AV base because there's all these neat innovations he's come up with.
There's a lot of cool stuff, and it sounded like you were having a good time with the interview, so that's cool.
Yes, and it sounds like you might have some of these larger AV bays in your future for some of your big rockets.
That's what I'm hoping. I can't wait. I mean, the versatility to be able to just do the things that I want to do but haven't really figured out how to do it. I'd rather have somebody say, hey, I got this design. Let me try it out for you. That's just me, though.
Cool. And so let's see some show news here real quick before we wrap things up here in a little bit. We are, as a team, will be working on carrying forth more of the Model Rocket Show episodes. As we all know, during the pandemic here, things got really weird for all of us.
Everybody, yeah.
Yes, even to the point where, I was taking some time off from the show here between the seasons just to recharge the battery so we can, not run into the ground here with all the stuff going on in our lives. But what's going on in our lives pales in comparison to what Noob has to deal with right now. And being in the service industry, manager in the service industry, he's in the thick of all the, worker shortages and super crazy long hours trying to keep a store open and serving customers that aren't always, grateful for the people who remain.
Too. Yeah.
And a father with a toddler. So he's got a lot on his plate right now. So he feels really bad that the Model Rocket Show hasn't been able to, stay on the regular schedule because of all that. And so the three of us were like, no problem, Noob. We can all tag team and do shows and keep the Model Rocket Show going. And as soon as you have a time to come up for air, you can pop on and either do episodes here or there, or if the situation permits, Noob, you can go and take over again like you were doing. So the show is still his. We're just going to try to help along and keep some topics going on for all of your Model Rocket fans out there, and keeping the show alive and vibrant.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to helping out a little bit because going back to the roots, and I mean, I deal with my team all the time, so there's a lot of topics that cross over, and so I'm kind of looking forward to helping out. It'll be fun.
Yeah. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun, and just looking forward to it. Actually, that's all I can really say about that. So
we got some ideas coming. We got ideas.
We do. We have some ideas brewing. So keep an eye out on the feed. We will drop in a message on there to let you know when things are going to start firing up on the Model Rocket Show with its next season, I guess we'll call it. And and we're gonna when we fill in on this, we're gonna call it the Model Rocket Show with the Rocket Noob and Friends. So it'll be that when we're filling in, and as soon as Noob is back, it'll just be with the Rocket Noob. So we're working on kind of tooling things up so it's not too weird sounding when he's not around. So
right.
So cool stuff, and yes. Anyway, let's see any other show notes stuff here. Nothing much for the Rocketry Show other than we've got guests coming up. We've got all kinds of cool things on the way for the new season. So far, the Conway Stevens episode just hit it right out of the park, apparently. He is flooded with all kinds of questions. And so
doesn't surprise me.
And great questions, too. So we were talking and online, actually, back and forth. So we'll have him back on. And actually, there's enough questions around a common topic that that's going to make a great episode. So Conway's going to be back on with us to kind of, follow up on those questions and dive into the topics that most of the people asking the questions want to know more about.
Cool.
Yeah. And as a show note, too, on the last episode, I got emails from people wondering where to get those soft links. And it's something I meant to put in the show notes. And as you can tell from the time frame, that was recorded on near September 11th this year. But you're hearing it now. So sorry, I forgot that I wanted to put a link to the soft links in the show notes in that period of time. Some of you asked questions about it. I answered them personally, and I think on our email list, but I also went ahead and modified the show notes and put the link in there. So if you want to know what it is, just look up on our website, TheRocketryShow.com. I believe it's RocketryShow.com/115 for episode 115. And in the notes there will be a link to one of the companies that does the soft links. And it's one of the ones that Conway has personal experience with as well. So there, a little bit of a administrivia or whatever you call that for the show here. And
administrative minutia.
Yes, exactly what it is. So now it's that time of the show. We jump in and thank some patrons here on the Rocketry Show. And so the patrons are definitely a major source of keeping the show on track and going. All the daily bills are paid for through patrons. And so that's always a good thing. And I'll start the list off with these patrons here. I'd like to thank Brett Nowacki. I believe that's how you say his last name. If I'm getting it wrong, just shoot mailbag at TheRocketryShow.com and say, hey, CG dummy, pronounce it like this. Also, Timothy Mock, Jeff Curtis. Thanks, Jeff. And Phil Bridges, longtime supporters of the show. Roy Tyson as well. Norman Prekel, Rob Hoagie, R. Smith, also Gary Dow, Jay Pullman, Don Johnson, and Pierre Marlou, Jeff Curtis, Philip Calvin, Jay Bryan, and Casey Anderson, Mark Essenwine, and Jim Wilson. Thanks a lot, gang. You guys have been supporting for a while. Also, Jimmy Burgess of Paradise Rocketry and Scott Masters, Jason O'Scally, George Raychor Jr., I believe. Again, let me know if I'm saying it wrong. And Charlie Harnett, thank you as well. And that's my first list of folks here. Jim, who do you have here?
I would like to continue the thank yous, as always, with my gratitude. Starting off with JohnRocket.com. Thank you, guys. Love it. Jason Rodney, Conway Stevens. Thank you. Kyle Lemkuhl and Paul Oliveri. Sam Feinberg. Thank you very much. Appreciate all your help. John Sicker. Sean Falkingham. Brian Scheckenberger. Thank you, guys. We all really appreciate it. E. Hoodnell. John Thompson, thank you. Mark McBride, Doug Wade, C. McCauley, appreciate it. Carl Hunting, and the Piedmont Student Launch Team, guys. I love you guys. Thank you very much. Your Twitter feed is awesome.
Yes.
Chris Irving, David Simmons, SRB, that's fusionrocket.biz, SRB Rocketry. Thank you very much. John Kusher, Kelsey Black, and good old Trucker Jim, always a pleasure. Thank you, sir. Brian Renneker and Jerry Krause and Justin O'Neill. Thank you very much. You guys make this show happen, literally.
Yes, and the last set of names I want to bring up here on our patron list. How about Todd West and also Jonah Cheney, Matt Tudor, Joseph Petro, Les Rayburn, who's been there since the beginning. Thanks, Les. And Steven Spencer as well, another long-timer here supporting the show. Bill Cook, again, this is like the long-timers club here. Bill Cook, thanks a lot, Bill. And Jason Cook as well. Gary Rosenfield, thank you for your support.
Thanks, Gary.
And Gary Ziegler. Toby Vanderbeek, another long-time one there. Ken Blade, he's been around forever. This is it literally is the long-timers club here. Eric Hamilton. John Beans and Scott Holla, as well as Guy Wadsworth and Phil P. and Tom Rum. Stephen Ray, I think he's out in upstate New York there. Thanks, Stephen. And Amanda Ho, Steve Sainer, Mark, and the folks at railbuttons.com. We thank all of you for your support of The Rocketry Show. And if you want to become a supporter of The Rocketry Show as well, just visit us at support.TheRocketryShow.com, and you'll be able to see what to do there. And there are patron-only episodes going up starting now. Also, some videos that we're working on and are going up. And so if you are the Countdown to Launch or higher member, you get to see those new programs that we're poking up there for the patrons. Just some, they're not fully produced like the show is here. They're just kind of, sometimes they are, usually they're not, but they're kind of like a peek behind the scenes. So we've got some of the last season's episodes are still in editing to go up as videos to see what was going on while we were talking to some of our guests. I believe the Jenna K episode is in production now. So yeah, it's a lot of cool stuff for your patrons. We're trying to help, trying to give some extra thanks to all of you for being supporters of the show. In addition to knowing that you're making the show happen.
Right. And if any of you guys have any ideas of something you would like to see, just drop us a line. Let us know. Yes. We'll be very accommodating because we appreciate you very, very much.
And so stay close, stay tuned as we get more of the programming going on there. The patrons will get a chance to interact with us more directly through Patreon as well. So that was another show in the can, so to speak. So we're happy to be able to bring you another episode of The Rocketry Show. We've got more on the way. And again, keep an eye out for the Model Rocket Show feed as well.
All right.
Yeah. And so we'll have to have an episode where we find out what's been going on with you. Well, it's kind of early for your TARC team news right now. So we have to give you some more time.
We threw up some, where our design is done, our 3D printing stuff has been designed. We've done a couple of prototype test flights. We're hoping to get out next weekend, depending upon the weather, to do some real hardcore testing. But we're in the ballpark. I'll just say that for now.
All right. Well, we'll find out more about how things have been going, generically, of course, because you can't give out any details. I'm sure at the end of the next episode, we'll find out more about what you've been up to.
There you go.
All righty, folks. On that note,
keep your eyes in the skies.
All right, everyone. We'll see you next time. And Jesse should be with us by then. And you have a great one. This has been The Rocketry Show.
Have a comment? We'd love to hear it. Send them to mailbag@TheRocketryShow.com. If you enjoyed what you heard, don't forget to check out our sister show, TheModelRocketShow.com. The Model Rocket Show is hosted by the Rocket Noob and is all about low to mid-power rocketry. TheModelRocketShow.com with Daniel, the Rocket Noob. Check it out today. The views and opinions expressed on these programs are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of Little Beth Entertainment or its sponsors.